brought to you in living color.
When they wrote up the systems and the rule set that we use, did working people get to write a line? What class of men on pen and paper jotted down their clues? With capital the heart of their design. When 90 million want a thing, but some shareholders say no, which class of people get to have their way? The people read the fine print, say that this thing has got to go, and we'll start writing a new contract here today. Don't you know that hundreds will work and one man keeps the money? They don't think they gotta tell us why. When they say the new social contract, all the bosses will be gobsmacked and everyone will want a sign. Oh, yeah, everyone will want a sign.
All right. Here we go. Hello, cousins. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Social Contract, where we're here with the new hell of the week. I'm joined as ever by my illustrious co-host, Mr. Mayor Jared, our own Mr. Mayor.
Good morning, good afternoon.
Yes, good morning and afternoon. And if you, I'm not joking when I say that every time the theme song plays, I'm sitting here singing it. Well, you can't see us because we're backstage. So if you enjoyed it, that's a courtesy of our own Mr. Jared, and you can check out his music where all music is available. He's got lots of it. It's really excellent. And I also, just since we're plugging things, I have a book coming out called Big Bad Wolf, end of the year. So Christmas around that time. I'll have more info about that later. But I have a new book coming. So and I'm excited about it.
I have an unspoken, I guess it's just like a personal agreement with myself that I do read. Like if my friends write books, I do read them, and I know you have at least one already that I have to sit down and read.
Just like a stack.
I'm currently on my. I have another friend who it's all nonfiction and. He has a book about. I don't want to like say the name of the book because I'm going to say things that sound non-complimentary, but I mean them complimentary because I very much enjoyed reading the book. But it's like part of the way through, I'm just going like, oh man, this is definitely like a weekly installment, like web series thing you were writing that you clearly put into a book. Though some of the weirdest pacing I've ever experienced, but at the same time, having a fantastic time reading it. And he's now on like book 6, and people like it, and he goes around and sells books.
Excellent. Yeah, no, that's great. And
I wanted to get to books 2, 3, 4, etc., just to see if it all like tightens up, because I swear that it's just a situation like a lot of people who do first albums where it's like you just didn't really know how to edit, so you just kind of put everything in there.
Yeah, I have a series planned for later, like because it takes so long to get these things off the ground and going. But the one I have now is probably a one-off. It's gonna be I'm not like a horror person, but it's a horror story. Because I know a lot of people are, but it's also like mystery thriller, paranormal thriller type of a thing. So there's clues, it's things to follow. So it combines, kind of like what you're saying, it combines some different concepts in that. And I have just recently came up with my cover art that I think I'm going to be using. So I will do a reveal on that down the road, and I'm pretty excited about it. I do this thing where I kind of like to do paintings on my covers, but this time I was going to use a photograph that I have, so it's a little bit different. But I'm finally just kicking into gear mostly with my writing, because it's in my art and stuff and pulling things together, because it took a really long time to get to this point. Anyway, enough about me. But I am looking forward to having some more information. I'm really bad at marketing. That's why I'm making myself bring it up, because I can't stand marketing. I hate it. It's like the worst thing in the world.
I will read and talk about your book when it comes out. Just
Well,
just keep it under 300 pages for me. That's all I'm looking for anymore.
I will try. I don't really know how, because it changes. I write in like just Word, like a lot of people do, so I'm writing on regular
Yeah,
page
you don't
size.
know what it
And
is
then
till you look at it.
right, and then when I
Mhm.
change it to like a size of a book, then instead of a size of a
Like,
paper, then it's like, oh great, just doubled in size, fantastic. So I don't know what the page count is going to be yet, but
I'm
it's
about to try to read just because I keep hearing about it, and do you know about the book House of Leaves? It seems to be referenced all the time online, even though I looked it up. It came out in like 2000, like 2008. It's not new, and it's the only thing I know about it is like the I guess inciting incident. It's a guy who's measuring his house, and he's like, "Why is my house slightly larger on the inside than the outside?" Like he measures it, and it's like 75 inches. Then he goes inside 75 and a quarter inches. He's like, "What is happening? This isn't possible." And then like stuff from there, like it's like kind of like a haunted house. I mean,
nice.
yeah, I'm pretty sure it's gonna be like a haunted house book where it's like, oh, the inside of your house is like some demon dimension or some shit, and,
Haunted. The inside is the walls are haunted.
it's written where like the words whoa, and like it's a little bit like Finnegan's Wakey,
Nice.
where it kind of gets creepy with that, even just like the text layout. But it's 790 pages long. Is the whole point of me saying this? Everything is so long. Like, please.
I hope mine doesn't get to that stage, because it's around, like as I'm doing things, it's like, around that now, but reformatted it could get a lot bigger. So I just don't know. I don't know what it's going to turn out to be when I get to the ultimate formatting stage. But the thing about it is it's sort of like two stories in one, because it starts in the present 1985, referring back to the story that takes place in 1975. So you kind of get two stories in one with it. And it's actually, I have this habit of like working on stories for like 20 years and more. So this is something that I have been working on for probably over 20 years. And I'm finally getting it to, it's not like perfectionism. It just kept changing and changing and changing. And it started off as a screenplay originally, and then became kind of like, screenplays are stupid and I hate them. So so I can't stand to write without detail. It's just like an instruction manual. I hate it. So I finally adapted it into a book, and then I've been, sidetracked and moved off of it and different things. And I had a movie to make, and then another book to write that went with the movie. And so now I finally am getting to the stories that I've been working on all this time, and kind of kicking things into gear. So I'm excited about it, and I'm making myself talk about it. And I will have more to say about it the closer we get, but it will be available unless some catastrophe happens or something, which I don't think it will. But it will be available at the end of the year for the holiday season horror time, like exactly what you want at Christmas, right? So okay, well. Weird news all around this week. We're not really dealing with a lot of hellish stuff as we often do. But more to the point, just some weird stuff. There's been a lot of Trump kind of, I don't want to say upheaval, because like that it's all the time like that, but he's just been all over the place, especially.
I kind of thought we were settling in. If anything, I'm surprised. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, we're going back to things maybe happening, because the routine so far has been maybe propose doing something and then not actually doing it.
Right.
Good,
Well, and
bad,
that's his
or other.
typical steez. That's like what he normally does. He'll say something, they'll be like, "You can't do that." All right, I don't care, and then move on. So, because he got bored. So with this now, he's talking about, and again, nobody on the left is looking to give him a W on anything. But if he does go through with this whole drug price thing that he's talking about, potentially that could be a good thing. But again, what kind of catches us in the speculation loop, because he says, "Oh, we're gonna do it in 30 days," and that basically is just like, a dog whistle to the lobbyists to make, saying, "Make me a deal, make me not do this, make me not go through with this, give me something," which is their specialty. So that's what they do, and we'll unpack that a little bit. But we want to start off with the final installment of the book by Michael Hudson, Super Imperialism, that Jared has been treating us to. I made it sound like he'd been reading the whole thing. It's not the case.
I would if we had like another 40 hours.
You're right. He's doing. He's been reading like the updated section about the more recent things, because the book was written in the 70s. So this kind of reflects on what's going on. And then the amended part was in what was it, 2022, I think you said. And then so that yeah, so there's some very modern context in there, and he wants to treat us to the last piece of that. So I'm going to quiet down and turn things over to our own Mr. Jared.
The fun of this last chapter, and you might even be like, if you remember a couple weeks back, we start talking about the TPP, and it'll bring it up again, I'm sure, in this concluding chapter, because in 2021, that was like what the most recent U.S. economic like hegemonic move was. They talk about the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the TPP, like its sister one that went along with it. It didn't happen, so you're like, well, what's the relevancy? The whole preceding like 400 pages of this book is going through every example of that kind of thing happening from World War I on. The United States, for like economic policy, international economic policy, I guess, the way that we have like dealt with our neighbors and friends, fellow humans on the planet Earth, has been a series of TPP-like things. The thing that was so horrific about that, if you remember from earlier in this chapter, is that it would set up like an international tribunal where if a company goes and does crimes in some other country, that other country can't just sue. Well, they can, but then there will then this tribunal. If you will have signed on to agree that this is okay, you'll be like, well, why wouldn't the government just ignore that? It's like, well, this is assuming you will have signed as a nation the TPP if you're part of this international trade deal, where you can't punish companies for being bad actors in your country. You can show up in Canada, wreck a whole rainforest or whatever. I know they don't have rainforests, you know what I mean? And then these tribunals with company-appointed lawyers and judges will just say, whatever, we don't, no harm, no foul. Or like, here, pay a $2,000 fine, you know. So that kind of that galls the conscious to even hear, like, what? That's ridiculous. That would be crazy. That's what we've been doing from about the 30s on, from World War I, the conclusion of fighting over who owes what for our loans, where all of Europe's like, oh, America will be chill. They'll just they won't be super loan sharks about those World War I loans. We were saving the world. The world was at stake. We were all together, friends of the West, Europeans, blah, blah.
But we were friends.
That debt, I'm pretty sure, I gotta freaking look it up, but because up until like through the 90s, early 2000s, that debt is still just there. It's like on the books. The World War I debt is still technically floating around, just building insane interest, and no one's ever gonna pay them. But if you really want to start a fight, you start bringing it up, like, hey, what about that World War I shit, kid?
What about that money you owe us?
Like, it's seriously, it's like a freaking bitter family fight thing where like your uncle owes your other uncle money for. This comes up because these acts are continuing. If he wrote this same forward, concluding chapter now, he would probably bring up something that isn't the TPP, one of these other various trade deals that we bully people into taking. So, all right, let's finish this thing out. I hope that this is interesting and makes you go, oh, let me go read the rest of that book to get into more detail. If you want to understand the causes of pretty much every international conflict from 1900 on, this is a very compelling argument. Argument? I don't know, history. A multipolar de-dollarized economy, the thing we've been talking about recently. We're getting up to present day. Britain and continental Europe after World War II recognized that they were being turned into economic dependencies, but made no attempt to create an alternative system. In addition to lacking the critical mass necessary to, quote, go it alone, they held to a deep ideological belief that creditors had a natural right to set the rules of international trade, investment, and diplomacy. And they dreamed that the United States somehow would act in the interests of the world as a whole, not in a selfish nationalistic way. Europe hoped that as the world's major creditor, the United States would find its self-interest to lie in helping everyone grow peacefully. That paragraph has a whole lot of thinky and feely stuff in it, which I super hate, especially when we're talking about like economics and politics and things that are concrete in the material reality. But those are filling the gaps as to why didn't all of these European countries see it coming? Why didn't they go, hey, they're putting us into what we would call today a debt trap? And it really does seem to be that all these governments, even while we're in the process of doing it, again, read the previous part of this book. It's a really good book. Even while the thing is happening to them and while they are reading and signing the papers, you have their various diplomats just straight out calling out, like, this is what's going to happen if we do this. But enough people but we have to protect the sanctity of debt. They owe blank money. They have to pay it. They couldn't just not pay it. Like, it's not an option to just not deal with this. And we've been kind of like just kicking that can down the road here up until current day. And you look at the debt, and it's a quadrillion dollar, a brillion dollars, a number you can't even imagine, and it like doubles every couple of years. And you're sitting like, well, that can't just like go on, right? And we're finding out because maybe, we all thought it was gonna. We thought it was going to fall apart a lot earlier, and they keep finding new weird shit to weld to the contraption, and it keeps moving forward.
That sounds like an imaginary amount of money anyways. Who cares? Money's fake.
Naturally, like what that paragraph just said, naturally you would assume that the person lending you money would have that then is supposed to combine your and their interest, where both of you now have an interest in that person succeeding in their business or enterprise or whatever they're doing. That isn't what the U.S. did. We said, F it, and eventually we ended up we inverted that and owed people so much money that, again, what are you going to do? Make the whole system collapse? The sanctity of debt. We can't all stop pretending that we're going to lose our phony baloney jobs here, gentlemen. All right. That illusion no longer exists. Now that the dust is settling, foreign countries are asking themselves just what the United States has to offer. It has agricultural exports, but fights to prevent other countries from growing their own food in competition with U.S. farmers. It has Hollywood movies, popular culture, and monopolies with proprietary intellectual property rights in the form of information technology and pharmaceuticals. It had strong aircraft sales before Boeing put financial engineering to raise its stock price ahead of industrial engineering to build safe aircraft. This is back in 2021. We're talking shit about Boeing. The United States also has arms sales, which its dollar diplomacy and saber-rattling forces other countries to buy. But on balance, the U.S. economy and its military diplomacy have become a burden on the rest of the world, confronted by U.S. military threats that oblige other nations to invest in their own countervailing defense spending. This military threat is not likely to go away. It is endemic to America's political system. The power of Donald Trump the power of what Donald Trump called the deep state was shown when his campaign promised to disengage the U.S. military from Afghanistan and similar lost causes proved to be his undoing. Why was he impeached? For not sending enough weapons to Ukraine that month. Like, the weapons still went, is the craziest part, but, like, he wasn't impeached for any of his rape or crimes or terrible person things. None of that shit matters because they then have to go after everybody who does it, which is every single person with a job in Washington, D.C. Why did he go down? Because he kind of sort of touched the unlimited war machine and may have gotten it to stop spitting out war for a couple of minutes. Oh, geez, I lost my place in the thing. Trump envisioned a peace dividend to help revive the civilian economy by shifting government spending away from what President Eisenhower called the military-industrial complex. But a constant flow of accusations accusing him of being a Russian agent did not abate, even after they were disproven by the Mueller report. Remember, guys, Russiagate has been proven wrong. It's not like was it, wasn't it? We know now it was fake. It's bullshit. It was 21 ex-CIA heads or whatever. The international community like signed a letter that Biden got them to sign, and then as soon as this comes out, all of them go, "Oh no, it wasn't me," and they like scatter off into the like, who was it? Who are these? The intelligence community. Who are these people? All right, as Larry Wilkerson, Chief of Staff to U.S. Secretary of State Colin Powell in the George W. Bush administration explained, Congress now is a wholly owned subsidiary of the military-industrial you-name-it complex. That's how it gets its money. That's how it gets reelected. That's how it makes the whole system work.
That is also the basis for many of our episodes and much that we have said.
It's the basis of freaking everything. Like, it all stems from this. This is all the weird shit they have to weld onto the sides of the contraption to try and keep it going for a couple more seconds. And you're just going around like, man, this is like ridiculous. It's like, because it starts from this. The foundation is evil, is rotten, not from a moral standpoint. It's just not done correctly in a way that it is inevitably going to fall apart. And It is crazy how long it has not fallen apart. All right, and when I say and everything else in it, I'm talking about universities. I'm talking about think tanks. I'm talking about this thing that Eisenhower said would pervade every office place. Most deranging to the world is the neoliberal rentier philosophy, rentier French, it's French, so it's rentier philosophy that America seeks to impose on other countries via the IMF and World Bank as levers to privatize, financialize, and promote corporate dominance over foreign governments. I like how for a second it becomes like a Rage Against the Machine song, though. Prioritize, privatize, financialize, criticize. Right. The IMF demands that debtor countries become more competitive by waging a class war against labor or else face economic sanctions and chaos. Austerity and anti-labor policies never enable a country to pay debts. They shrink and polarize economies. That was made clear after World War I when demanders of reparation debts pretended that Germany could squeeze out enough domestic tax money to pay in foreign currency. It was all junk economics, but to neoliberal creditor nations, self-destructive austerity for debtors is a lever to break down democratic and other political resistance to financialization and privatization sell-offs. By making debtor economies less able to pay, austerity makes... Okay, by the way, austerity, we all know what we're talking about here. Austerity are the various measures that you put onto the people to, like, live shittier. Like, we're going to make things crappier for the lower classes, supposedly for the benefit of everyone. If you look into Greece's financial situation over the last many, many years, it's like, we're cutting all of your social services, everything's getting shittier, and that's to service debt, to pay off a loan to some international bank over here, the IMF.
Plus also wildfires.
Yeah, like that's... Oh, crap. I don't read ahead and try to, like, ape the points he's going to make, but here we go. Most recently, the IMF's loans to Greece ended up bankrupting it, and its many loans to Argentina led the IMF's demoralized staff to complain that despite the fact that every forecast they made showed that debts could not be paid, the IMF continued to make them anyway. So there's people literally sitting at the IMF going, dude, they're never paying this shit back. We can't make this loan. And they're like, shut up, fill out, hit the buttons, sign this contract.
Yeah, that sounds like the housing crisis of 2008. Yeah, just keep doing it.
When Hudson says junk economics, that's a great intro book if you want to read it. He just goes through it's an ABCs of economics. It's called J is for junk economics. Junk economics is where you like make up a whole when you're based on they're never going to be able to actually complete these transactions. That's junk economics. If I make a $10 million loan to a baby, it's like that baby's not paying that shit back, and I know that. Like I'm doing something else because I'm trying to like own this baby or. I don't know why I was a baby in that metaphor. The U.S. usually at U.S. insistence, to support client oligarchies or to pay U.S. banks and vulture funds. Sorry, that is why we are continuing to make the IMF is like, no, you got to make that loan even though we know they cannot pay it because it's at U.S. insistence to support client oligarchies or to pay U.S. banks and vulture funds. Frickin', I don't know, is Malay in Argentina, is he a client oligarch? That weird rich guy, the weird libertarian dude who is now running Argentina, is he that? Is he a break away from that? Oh.
It's hard to tell what that dude's deal is.
I think client oligarchy would probably apply to that. America's neoliberal opposition to foreign government autonomy and regulatory power is the essence of what is becoming Cold War 2.0 against China, post-Soviet Russia, and their fellow members of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. The self-defeating U.S. trade sanctions against Russia and China are driving these and other nations into a position where their only defense is to do what Britain and the rest of Europe could not do in 1945, create an alternative economic order with its own rules and replace the dollar by negotiating their own mutual currency swaps, using gold or both gold and swaps together, which is why last week talking about they're slowly taking their gold back. Keynes proposed a multipolar, old economics philosopher who all the libertarians say they like but don't actually follow. Keynes proposed a multipolar international financial system at Bretton Woods in 1944. That Bretton Woods ends up being like the Manhattan Project of finance. You just hear, oh yeah, ever since Bretton Woods. It's like, well, what was Bretton Woods? It's a place where they had a meeting about like, what are we gonna do for money in World War II and shit. The Bancor was to be issued. The Bancor was a currency just for this. That was Keynes's proposal. We should make up a whole fake currency to try and do this. And that's why when they talk about doing that shit today, it's like, no, that's Keynes. I'm like, well, not. the fake currency part is the only thing they want to take from Keynes, not the like how it was supposed to be used. The Bancor was to be used as fiat money by a global central bank making loans to countries that ran a balance of payments deficit, so they would not have to impose self-defeating austerity. Because if you make the loans in a whole separate currency, you don't run into the whole like valuing and devaluing your own currencies and these whole like trade things between currency valuations, blah blah blah. If you put this all on a whole separate thing, you could call it anything, but he called it the Bancor. That would be the idea of that. It's like you do that over here in this whole separate playground so it doesn't mess up your actual country, which sounds like a cool idea, but also it was like 1940s. Maybe we didn't know. As Keynes himself noted, the time was not yet ripe for such a regime. Neither Britain and its empire nor Europe were prepared to accept any form of international money and credit not based on the US dollar and US gold holdings. Ultimately at issue today is how Russia and China can take the lead in creating an alternative aimed at minimizing the cost of living and doing business. At the national level, that requires rejecting financialization, its associated privatization, and neoliberal tax favoritism for rentiers, people who get rent landlords. The objective is best made by creating a domestic monetary system and central bank policy promoting industrialization, public infrastructure and investment, and the upgrading of labor while taxing away rentier income. That is the opposite of the U.S. demands to privatize infrastructure and sell it off to rent seekers. Internationally, a finance system is required that avoids the Treasury bill standard and the resulting U.S. free lunch, enabling the military adventurism and neoliberal demands of dollar diplomacy. To create such an alternative to the dollar area's Treasury bill standard and America's potential ability to impose financial sanctions at will and without regard for international law or treaties, China and Russia and other countries are moving to replace dollars with gold and mutually holding each other's currencies. The idea there is like if I hold yours, you hold mine. It's kind of like a less intense version of like a standoff where you're both involved with this. You don't want their currency to cave because that's what your stuff is held in. So you actually want them to do better, and vice versa. Everyone growth together. Hooray! The use, to some extent, of gold as a means of settlement is desirable mainly to constrain U.S. and NATO military spending, and indeed that of any future aspirant to global hegemony by forcing countries to deplete their monetary reserves at the price of military adventurism. Basically, it's like if the U.S. had to pay for all of its wars through these years, and he mentioned like Korea, Vietnam, etc., Ghana? I think Ghana. We wouldn't have been able to afford it. Like the only reason we could do it financially is because of this whole scheme we have going. And if that scheme broke down, we'd be like, well, we want to go to war over there, but we literally can't like pay for the tanks and bombs and fuel and shit, so we can't. It would constrain our anyone's ability to do that if you have to pay for your own. Yeah. A new international central bank created outside the U.S. diplomatic sphere also might create some version of what Keynes had proposed in his fiat Bancor to finance trade deficits, but not military spending or other balance of payment drains. This is you have to make rules where it's like you can't just go spend this on bombs. No doubt the United States will seek to resist such de-dollarization and the creation of an alternative international finance system not dependent on dollar credit and neoliberal financial philosophy, but America's increasingly belligerent threats of sanctions and regime change attempts have only accelerated the breakaway, and with its own financialized economy becoming seriously deindustrialized, it is difficult to see what U.S. diplomats can do short of war or regime change, except for asymmetrical warfare, which doesn't work, it turns out, by promoting a neoliberal ideology that celebrates economic polarization and rentier gains. I'm on to our last paragraph, our last page. It's like 4 paragraphs. That ideology and its academic economic cover story is rapidly losing its ability to persuade other countries to succumb to opening their economies to U.S. banks or foreign investors taking over and privatizing the commanding heights of their economies, or indeed to let a domestic rentier class emerge from within their own finance and insurance and real estate sector and its associated monopolies. One sentence, man. That whole paragraph, one sentence. Never tell me that Michael Hudson doesn't appreciate Karl Marx. Marx is like that. Whole paragraph, one sentence. There's no periods. He does not. He just keeps going. I think the German language is a little bit like that, too, with all of its very long words. The looming global fracture is becoming a fight over the most basic organizing principles of economies. All successful economies throughout history have been mixed, meaning private, public. What you can be hearing this me like, is Michael Hudson describing effective working fascism? And it's like, one could make this argument. I personally do not think there should be a public-private partnership, except under extremely specific conditions and with extremely specific restrictions on that shit. But what U.S. Cold Warriors depict as an economic rivalry between America and China is not really a competition between national economies. It is a global conflict of economic systems. At issue is what kind of economy the world is going to have. Will it be privatized, Reaganized, Thatcherized, I can't highlight anything, and financialized neoliberal economy? Again, we're going back to rage here. Privatized, Reaganized, Thatcherized, financialized neoliberal economy organized by central planning in Wall Street, or will national governments maintain their policy independence and take their economic and social destiny into their own hands? The choice is between a financialized world order that this is so like alternative rap lyrics here. The choice is between a financialized world order that aims to privatize infrastructure and create monopoly rents for credit creation, transportation, education, healthcare, communications, prisons, and pension funding, as in the United States. He just listed all the shit that you can't just put on an open market or your world falls apart. Can't do it. You can't have healthcare, education, transportation, communication, prison, pension funding, etc. Like things that are necessary for human life just can't be on the open market. You just can't do it. We've proven that. You can't do it. China doesn't. That's the difference. China doesn't have that on an open market. We do. Whoa! Here we go. Holy shit, we did it. It's crazy. It's such a big difference in systems, right? We have to just change absolutely everything. The choice is between. I already read that. Or a mixed economy, keeping basic infrastructure investments in public domain to be subsidized so their services can be provided at minimum cost, or ideally freely, while taxing away fire sector rentier income instead of giving it tax favoritism. That shit should be 99% tax. If you get rent from anything, and not just literal rent of like a house and a building, it's all of the shitty middleman fees that are involved in every single transaction. Everything you do with every bank or loan or payment or check, whatever, they're freaking taking nickels off the top of it. That's just rent. PayPal extracts rent from you every time you send anybody anything. Like, we should be getting that down to absolutely nothing. That should be minimum. Why don't we have a national just fee-free payments transfer system like basically every single country in the world has, except for the U.S. Oh boy. Like freaking Brazil is over here. They have a thing called PEX, where it's just a thing that I guess the government pays for it. Maybe it's because they have the U.S. doesn't actually have a central bank. Like the Fed is our quote central bank, but it's privately owned. So like figure that out. It's not like the government doesn't really have control over it. And through its like financial rigmaroles, you can argue that the Fed kind of controls the government, and that's why you hear like Ron Paul and them going on like, "End the Fed, destroy the Fed." And I'm like, I do agree that should happen, but we have very different ideas as to like why and what will happen when that happens. It's the whole point of having a central bank is that the central bank cares about the country. It's like a nationalist in that way, that it's trying to improve the country that it's in. It's making loans for the point of increasing production, increasing agricultural output, industrial output, et cetera, but our central bank does not do that. It's entirely financialized, corporatized, Reaganized, Thatcherized. It's ized in that way, where now it makes loans based on what will F up the stock market in a good way. It'll F it up, F it upward. And that's how loans are made. That's Hudson's biggest criticism here, is as to why like the shit has been put on a collision course with death for so long. Final paragraph. The coming multipolar world will not be called a Chinese century or that of any other national economy, because the epoch of unipolar dominance is over. Perhaps it simply will be the un-American century, picking up history that turned into a detour with the Great War and its long aftermath. Picking up history that turned into a detour with the Great War and its long aftermath, saying Michael Hudson, if he looks at his vision of history, his like version of it, which I find accurate, it's like, we're marching along forward, and then from about World War II to now, it's just been this weird, well, it's not weird, like we can comprehend what it is. It's when finance itself just took over in such a way that production stopped being an upward line and became a flat, and then now they're trying to take it down, like they're trying to we're de-developing, de-industrializing, making less shit.
Right.
All right, that is the end of my reading. What do you think? What do you think?
What do you think?
Here's
I think
subject index. Do you want to hear about Afghanistan? Because that's on page 446.
Well, what I loved about this is that it reinforces, like an expert reinforces what we're always talking about. We've been talking about a lot of this stuff since day one, about
I just have
how.
words for it now. I know I can explain it a little better.
Yeah, and he's got this whole vocabulary about it. I mean, we're talking about somebody who actually can legitimize and back up the stuff that we're always ranting about, because
And this guy is an accredited. I don't bring this up for like appeal to authority things. It's that he is for all the
Right.
mainstream things. He's got all the right degrees, and he's worked for various like he has all the affidavits that people be like, well, he's just some weirdo who doesn't know. It's like, no, he's
no.
highly respected in his field.
Yeah, and still gives interviews and talks about this stuff and that kind of thing. But and it's a good reference to back up the kind of things that we're always talking about, because everything is, as Jared said a little bit earlier, is based on a rotten structure. It's in a metaphorical kind of a way, but also
Junk
in a literal
economics.
way.
No loans that are made knowing they cannot possibly mathematically be repaid.
Right. So it's sort of everything is, you're talking about imaginary debt because nobody can pay it back. It's not real. Imaginary
World War I debt. It's still floating around, I guess. Well,
Yeah,
that's a
I mean,
loan that we knew
yeah.
no one could ever possibly pay back, and that's what started it.
So it's the idea of like, okay, our entire, and then earlier in the reading, it was about how, or I think just before that, about how like, well, everything is based off of an economic index of perfection that doesn't exist. So we're balancing somewhere between debt that is imaginary because it could never be paid back, and an economic system that is imaginary because you can't make that happen. So it's like everything is not only just a lie, it's all just this exploitable, broken down system that never worked from the beginning. And then introduction Reagan that just took complete advantage of everything and monetized the government to such an extent. That's how we ended up with Trump and Biden and now, and things being the way they are now.
And they have Trump doing where somebody is in his ear talking about, because the economic moves he's making do make some kind of sense. If you actually, the more I've read these books and looked at like the history of the thing, Trump wants there to be no income tax, and he looks at when was the last time there was no income tax, and it was 1890 whatever, and it's like, well, how did we get money? It was from tariffs. So he's like, oh, cool, tariffs, and then all about. But the world you can't actually make America great again. You can't actually just do like a time machine, roll the clock back, and everything's cool. Things are different. Things have changed, and because of the U.S.'s actions and the the way it has fucking Frankensteined the global economy into what it is now. Yeah, it doesn't work anymore. That was how it worked pre us doing all of this shit, pre like dollar hegemony. Except that's when we had like a gold standard, and the U.S. was a third world country making textiles.
And then in that as well, you look back and you'd be like, okay, in the Reagan administration, they were making all these changes. They were all criminals. They all ultimately served some kind of jail time or were fined in some way. Why were people so happy? Because that stuff really hadn't taken effect in a major way yet. We're now seeing the result, and that's why people are so unhappy. This is what the idea was. This is what they were going for, to manipulate government so greatly that it became in itself a money-making machine, a la the industrial military complex and these debts and loans and preventing other countries from exploiting their own agriculture, all of these things. So, we did ultimately become this bully of the world, and that was fully laid out in front of people in the 80s, and they were like, hell yeah, we're not doing war right now. Well, you're just going to do war every decade after this forever. So, to make money. Because
and now it's not even us trying to get money out of people. It's that we owe everyone so much money that we threaten to essentially knock over the entire Jenga tower if anyone dares like step out of line. And that's why BRICS is important, a thing that needs to like be considered. That's why it exists in the first place. People don't do stuff because they want to. It's necessity, and we've created new necessity.
And what Trump is trying to shut it down all the time. Like, he's always bitching about BRICS because you're like, you're not allowed to play the game without us. You have to do $1. You have to.
we keep kicking people off of stuff and sanctioning and blah blah blah, and they don't work. Like Russia's
But
economy has only gone up while we're trying to put on the most. You can do that shit to Cuba, I guess, because it's a small enough of a country that it kind of works on Cuba. It doesn't work on Russia. It doesn't work on China. It doesn't work on
but,
Pakistan. Like
to those ends, as we speak, evidently right now, there's a couple of things going on because Trump is on his international tour right now, and he is brokering a deal. Let's say him and his people are brokering a deal with Saudi Arabia for the biggest arms deal possibly ever made, which I can't see any reason why it won't go through. And at the same time, Qatar has generously donated super jet to him for his use to now act as Air Force One. So,
it's
and
like
this
quaint.
is just this week. This is just going on this week, and then again, the manipulation of potential manipulation of pharmaceutical prices, if that even happens. I think that it's not going to happen because it does seem more like an opportunity for him to call out and be like, we're going to do it in 30 days, which means lobbyists, you got 30 days to come up with something, which is what they do. It's their steez to get him not to do it. Or for, say, parliamentarian or some dumb shit. Like, he can just say whatever or doesn't even need an excuse. He just moves on, So I have no reason to believe that any of that's going to happen. But it does put us in the speculation zone, as per usual.
They're running. I have three. This is a segment. I'm going to call it headline. This is very original. But the thing these three headlines have in common are they're just what Nicolette is saying, where a thing has been said, but we already know the pattern of you say a thing and then it either doesn't happen or gets super changed by the time it actually goes through. Like even the freaking Doge cuts. Like none of those cuts are happening. They've just been moved. We're like, he's defunding the Ned and USAID and all this shit. And we're like, okay, that's kind of something. And then you find out a month later, well, they didn't actually do that. They earmarked money for this thing, and then they had to vote on actually doing the cuts, and they didn't. So, so nothing actually has happened at all. And that's the theme between these three headlines here. Will something happen, or will it be just another one of the actually I'm kidding, or actually no? So like this. Yeah, exactly. Here's a video clip. My sound never goes through my thing because of how my computer. So I'm gonna read it. I'll read the subtitles to you. Trump, we pushed Israel to get aid to Gaza. Gaza came up, and I said, we gotta be good to Gaza. Those people are suffering. We gotta be good to Gaza. We're gonna take care of that. There's a very big need for medicine, food, and medicine. We're taking care of it. In terms of like opening up more access points, very hard. Pushing the Israelis, we are to open up more access points to get food and medicine into Gaza. How did the prime minister respond to that? Well, felt well about it. Like,
right.
Okay, so is that happening? Are we? Because I think it was yesterday. He's talking about like the U.S. will acknowledge Palestine as a state, and I'm like, okay, that's what?
Yeah. Again, we in no way are trying to give W to Trump.
If that happened, that would be good. Is why I'm like laughing.
Yeah, that's the issue. If he does something good, like there's no two ways around it. But will it happen?
Somebody, it was fucking Jimmy Dore was saying, like, I bet he's trying to get a Nobel Prize. And I'm like, I could see that as the motivation. He's like, F you, Obama, I'm also going to get a Nobel. Because if he did that, if he somehow, like, I think that'd be more deserving than Obama.
Yeah, Obama just got one because people thought he was cool. Like, it really wasn't for a reason.
They said, like, this is a hopeful one. Maybe you'll be a cool guy. And then he drone struck more people than any previous president. Hey, look at that.
Deported the shit out of a lot of other people. So.
That sure would be something. But once again, in a week, the story might become, it'll be the opposite. It'll be like, Palestine must be destroyed.
Yeah, well, it already is the opposite because we started off the beginning of the year with these weird AI videos of him being like New Trumpington and fucking Gaza. And so
the Riviera of the Middle East.
Yeah, so I mean, like, what are we just supposed to think that he just understands things now, like in some sort of fundamental way of a leader?
The caption is like, "Did they finally reach him?" And I'm like, "Doubt it."
Nope.
All right, next headline. Oh, look, another thing that happened and now is unhappening, or maybe it isn't. Who knows? U.S. agrees to lower the tariffs on Chinese goods to 30% from 145. You know, just a little change. from 145 to 30. China to reduce tariffs on U.S. imports to 10% from 125. So they're still being nicer than us. But there you go. Like, what's this? Is that what's going to
Will
happen?
this
Or
go through?
tomorrow will it be different again?
Here's the big question, though. We know now that the prices of everything have risen, even domestically.
Well, they're not going back down.
Aren't affected, exactly, and they will not go back down at this point. They're going to act like they're making up any other excuse under the sun for this. So the question is now, when, let's say it goes through, Trump is taking his celebratory lap saying, money, it's going down, going down. What's the next excuse going to be, a la commerce, to say, we couldn't because there was this unicorn tax that we found out, like what is that going to, what is the next thing? Because we know obviously that they're going to have to scramble and think of some reason to say like, oh, well, if imported goods now are lower in price, why are we not lowering, the more domestic things? Or why did we not lower the prices? What is that spatial gap on why?
I'm waiting for Trump to get one of his weird moods, and he goes, you know what? I've been trying to tell the eggs to go down in price, and they won't do it, so we're going to be nationalizing the egg industry. Like, if he starts nationalizing companies that won't do what he says, because that's how it should work. You should be like, here are your goals. Things must cost this much, this, and this. If you can't do it in 60 days, you're done. You're out. We're taking the state is taking over your business, and you just keep doing that because companies won't be able to, and then something would change slightly. Yeah. I don't know what. Something.
And I was listening to him talk the other day, which I rarely do, and I just thought, like, man, this must hit so hard if you're stupid. Like, this has got to give you like the mega boner of how good like you think this guy is if you believe what he's saying, like on anything at any point. Like if you flip the script and it was like we were for him and it's like, oh my God, like this is why they act like he's the second coming of Jesus. Because if you were dumb, like you would just eat this shit so hard. And again, this all ties in together with what Jared was talking about with the Super Imperialism reading, because we have, okay, if the tariffs go down, if aid gets to Gaza, if they make an arms deal, if he's able to make the pharmaceutical prices go down, which again that would fall into the same category. Is they're not, these companies are not willing to lose what they make off of America. In that
the price
case,
here, you have 60 days. If you don't, we're taking all your shit.
Yeah, and then the idea of that is like, well, they're going to do the same thing. They're going to say, oh, well, we have this special reason we have to do it. Because one thing he was right about is that which we have all known, so it's not like he made a unique point here. Bernie's made this point a million times, but okay, you take a drug in Canada and you take it here, and it's like 10,000% inflation here. What's the difference? And that money, that extra money that these companies are getting, they're like, oh, well, we use it for R&D. We use it to figure out how to make more drugs for you and blah, 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 blah. And so they're not going to want to give up all of that extra income that they're just getting for like, just straight off this country. So they're going to come up with some reason why that can't happen. And again, maybe it's, like I said, like a dog whistles to the lobbyists about that kind of thing. But also they are benefiting extremely well from the high cost of food and living. And the reason being, and this is not conspiratorial, although it sounds like it, the reason being is there are reports now, it's like, oh, well, thank you, Dumb Monthly, for this, crack journalism. But there were reports coming out, like all of CNN and such, that are saying like people are having a hard time eating healthfully because they can't fucking afford food, which is true. But who benefits from that? The garbage Cheetos are super cheap, and the tomatoes you can't afford. And then you live off that crap, you get sick, you go into the medical system, which is for profit. So they end up getting you on things. Then you start taking pharmaceuticals that, you're paying $10 billion more for than anyone else or someone is. And because you're part of the medical system now, when maybe you were healthy before. And then ultimately down the road, that feeds the funerary system. So,
that's the rational kernel where I can talk to RFK people. And like, I don't know anybody anymore who's like a hardcore RFK person just because of all the various things that have
happened. They're all kind of embarrassed finally, I think, at this point.
But on the health stuff, it's like, I don't think that all the things you just said, I believe, are entirely correct, and not necessarily because there's like a horrible, evil conspiracy to like inject autism into your children, but it does become a self-fulfilling prophecy and a beneficial one to these industries if you're never doing well. It's the freaking Chris Rock routine from a long time ago. It's like, notice how they don't cure anything anymore. It's like, yeah, they don't want you to get rid of an illness. They want to make it so you can just live with it, so they can make you a customer for life. He was doing it with AIDS. He's like, my AIDS is acting up. I gotta fucking take my pill.
Right.
And I know people now who basically have that life. My AIDS is acting up. I gotta fucking.
Like
I have these pills I have to take for my like immune system, and like that might be a bad example of a thing. Actually, no, they've been curing HIV. Didn't they cure like 4 total people at this point?
Yeah, there kind of is. That's the thing. Well, to what you're saying, before Chris Rock, there was a comedian, kind of an orator, kind of in the Dave Chappelle style, where he just talks. And this was back in the 50s, and his name was Dick Gregory. And he was all, around all the way up until, he died of old age. And he had kind of an unusual dude. But he was sort of the first black comedian to break through to white audiences, allowed to perform to white audiences, and, that kind of a thing. And he would sort of do the same Dave Chappelle type of stuff, sit on a stool, nurse a cigarette, talk about it. And the smoking was a big part of his pacing, of the stories of how he would talk and how he would, he was kind of a slow talker, not necessarily like firework jokes, but just kind of orate, essentially. So down the road, he gets to the point. He was also a civil rights activist, did a lot of marching, friend of Muhammad Ali, this, that, the other, of Martin Luther King Jr. Pretty famous guy that a lot of other people know. Well, down the road, he gets into this idea that he ultimately brings up into his act, is like, okay, so I used to weigh quite a bit. I used to smoke pretty much constantly. And then it finally one day dawned on me, they're taxing me for these cigarettes, right? They're taxing me. Every time I buy these cigarettes, I got to pay a tax. Okay, like non-smokers are like, yeah, great, good, you should. Okay, but this is before all that, right? We're talking 60s, 50s, 60s, 70s. And he's like, okay, so essentially I figured out one day they're taxing me to die. They are making me pay for my own death, so they gave up smoking. And then he ultimately ended up doing a thing where as part of his civil rights movements, he went on like hunger strikes and stuff. And then he became sort of this, by the 80s, became this sort of like health nut, I guess you might say. And he would do campaigns where he literally like ran Forrest Gump style across the country. And then they had a food supplement that people used to just call Dick Gregory, and it was just ground up like vegetables and stuff. Like they were like, "Give me the Dick Gregory. I need the Dick Gregory," and it was this big, thing. But like to watch his evolution in that point, it was really interesting. He got a little weird in his opinions towards the end of his life, but I will say this: that when I had heard him make that point. In a documentary or old video or something, I was like, holy shit, that's true. And that really opened up my eyes to what I'd said just before, which is that, okay, if they feed you bad food and they make healthy food unattainable, like a la food desert, but also unaffordable, that benefits the pharmaceutical company, which they can work in tandem to do this, that benefits the medical insurance industry, and down the road ultimately supports the funerary industry. There's no reason why these gigantic industries cannot collude to make your life shit and make money off of you. If you saw the what was it, Fallout, the show Fallout, based off video game, I don't play games, but it's probably in the game too, where they come up with this concept of let's nuke the world to essentially sell our product of underground safety living. So like the people were so bad that they were like, let's do that. We're willing to do that. Let's literally nuke the world, make it look like it was some sort of an attack, and drive up people underground to make money off of this system that we have created. That obviously is a little extreme and fictional, but is it really that hard to believe, based on what's already going on, that kind of a thing. So if Trump tampers with those things, either he's already got something set up in place, not planning to go through with it, or we'll just forget about it, or maybe these things will happen, like I don't see him doing anything altruistically. First of all, I think that's very important to say. Like, he's not doing anything for the good of the people. It might be to win a Nobel Peace Award. It might be because he's going to get something on the back end. But let Jared make a comment now.
This is why I end up not earlier I was talking about how when we get into like what thoughts and motivation things, because the more I end up focusing on, the more people in general, I think the more that one focuses on like evil intent being where it comes from, you can get a far larger profit margin off of a processed piece of food than you can off of just selling like a raw, any, name a vegetable to somebody. Like the profit margin on just a freaking ear of corn is minimal compared to if you take that corn, process it into like a McDonald's sandwich of some kind.
Yes.
The profit margins start going up. So I don't think that it's not even that I don't think that, because like they could be intent ends up not actually mattering. And I love the phrase "the point of a system is what it does," because the end effect is the same regardless of if somebody had evil intent or just money intent, which is usually where I have an easier time going down to that, because that's how you end up getting all these people like go along with. I don't think everyone is actually just evil working in these companies. I think it's a bunch of money driven decisions that eventually end up with these same results. Why are there, quote, food deserts? Well, in the cities, we're trying to extract maximum profit margin from people. So like you're going to minimize grocery stores and maximize restaurants. And like what are the kinds of restaurants that can afford to continue going and are never going to shut down? Those are your multinational chains, your McDonald's, etc. And ironically, I think it's entirely by design and how it ends up this way. It's the companies that receive the most government money. So when you have people saying when you arrive at the conclusion, people are saying the government is poisoning you for XYZ like nefarious purposes. I can see how you get there, because you have companies that are heavily subsidized by the government and can only exist with the current super profits that they make because of all of the government help they receive, like a McDonald's or Burger King or any other multinational chain. And then you look at the quality of the food they're putting out, and you look at the knock-on effects, and sure, the government paid a company that then drove out all of the more healthy options, XYZ, one thing leads to another, and here we are. Is it because evil lizard people run the world? Is it because a bunch of people just pursued profit, which is what the system tells you to do and legally requires you to do? But it happened. Here we are.
And then we all know you go to the grocery store, right? And you can go like, okay, I'm going to go buy some oats, right? You can maybe find one or two options of plain organic oats, but there's like 10,000 different versions of cookie flavored granola, around it before you even, can get to that point.
Quaker, like I'm pretty sure a Kraft brand who, again, heavily government subsidized, blah, blah,
Yes.
blah.
Absolutely. And one of the biggest offenders and users of glyphosate on their products, which is straight up Roundup, and they do it, they put it on there and you eat it, like that's the thing. So they're also on the back, the front end taking out of the back end. They've made a kind of a closed loop system as far as these things go.
Vertical
and I just
integration.
Yesterday saw a video, couple of TikToks kind of back to back together. It's not like this is a headline type of a thing yet, but you probably will be seeing this in your local grocery. But it's like they were like, okay, well, the recession food is in, and they were showing just like they're painting across like all these really horrible, disgusting things, like this weird neon colored juices, I guess, like in gallon jugs, like bright blue something, like literally looked like floor cleaner, and like these like not juice, but like some sort of kind of sugar water, right?
That
Some
could just
corn
be like
syrup.
that's one of the Tampico flavors.
And then they go to the frozen section, and it's all like pizza flavored pizza bite, eating with the pizza that, and it's just like they're showing the most like dog shit garbage foods that are like, super, super affordable at this point. And then with the notion that like, okay, well, the recession food is in, the poverty food is in, because going back to what, the CNN reported, going back to what CNN reported, which is people can't afford healthy food, and it's fucking them up. Like, okay, well, we got an answer for that, like, and then you look at it, and it's not far fetched to be like, okay, well, the people who are making money producing these disgusting foods also have deals with, like medical, pharmaceutical, and stuff like that. They're not.
They also make
exclusive.
the quote healthier food. They just put an organic label on it. The same companies make all of it.
They're not necessarily exclusive. Like these, there is very, it's not like secret backroom deals going on. It's going on right in front of your face. It's just that, like always, there's nothing we can do about it because our government does not function as a government. It functions as a corrupt entity.
If you ask a lot of people, they will say like, well, if you just buy the correct products, that's what they will stock, because supply and demand are still linked, because it's 1812.
But also don't forget, we have taken civics out of schools starting in the 70s. We have taken.
Well, I'm saying it doesn't work. Like, it was always conveniently. If you just buy the really expensive shit, the whole world would like. If you talk
Right.
to,
Yeah. Well,
I
yeah.
have no problem with vegans, meaning like people who just don't eat meat. That's totally fine. That's whatever. Do whatever you want with your life. But it's people who will, because I've met these people who will tell you that the way you solve problems in the world is through market dynamics. Is if
No.
you simply purchase the correct thing. Which, if it's craft making shitty food and craft making quote good food, the more expensive food, how are you fighting the system by giving money to a different division of craft?
And that's exactly right. Like if they've got, here's their artisanal brand, it doesn't say craft,
Exactly.
it says something else. It says the greenhouse farms or whatever, and you're like, ooh, that sounds good, right? Greenhouse farms. Go on fucking Google and you're still like, no, this is a subsidy of craft.
It
And
just
then
happens
like
to
there's like
cost more.
5 main companies that own everything, right? So that's exactly the point too. And then if you take education away from people like civics and food and nutrition and these different kinds of things, I'm not talking about financial literacy. Like that shit is a hoax. You need to know about certain things, but people, like, if you're poor, you fucking know how to, like, what being poor is. You don't need to be told not to spend your money on I don't know, candy all the time or some shit. But like the idea is that people in this country are super stupid by design. Education really only functions as a babysitting tool to keep kids legally obligated into a place so their parents can go and work. And we found that out during the pandemic, that was absolutely the case. So the fact of the matter is, and now we're also finding out, to build on this, they're not even teaching kids to read anymore. And you're like, of course they're teaching kids to read. No, what they're doing is they're no longer teaching like phonics. They're no longer teaching people how to sound things out. So teachers these days, you are in music, so you probably didn't really have this issue. But
that method of teaching reading is kind of going away because now people know what you know, which is it doesn't fucking work.
Well, the thing that I guess what I'm hearing now, kind of through what teachers are saying online, is like substitute teachers or like English teachers or whatever. They're saying what the kids have been taught, and you get up to like middle school age, what they were taught in the beginnings of reading is like, just take a wild guess, just guess at what the word is. So when somebody like our age or older is like, okay, no, sound this word out, sound the word difficult out, where does it start, where does it end, they're like difficalis, and it's like, where did you even get that? Like, it's because they've been taught, just guess based on context.
It's whole
there's no
word education versus
there's no hard education limits happening anymore.
We have
They're
gone
really
back
just
to phonics.
pushing them through the system as fast as possible, which you could probably say stems from the No Child Left Behind era, basically of how that affected education. I digress on that. But the point is we're dealing with a population that is getting dumber and dumber all the time, mostly not through their own means. I don't think a lot of people go through life being like, I'm going to be so fucking stupid. You'll see. And, it just, if you don't know what you don't know, you don't know how to be healthy. You don't know how to live properly. Like, not to say that like there's not a housing crisis and there's food crisis and that. I'm talking about education. But if they can keep you stupid, if they can keep you working manual jobs, which there was just another story about Trump and McDonald's, unsurprisingly, coming together to make like 1 million fucking jobs or like 500,000 jobs, useless, stupid jobs.
You need to reduce
AI
1 million jobs. I want him to cut 1 million jobs out of the economy by automating them.
Yeah, exactly. And then we get robot
take that
tax.
quote.
That I don't understand what is so hard to understand about that. Let anybody who wants to automate. If a robot can do somebody's job, a person doesn't need to be doing it. But everything that gets automated, everything that's going to take water to cool these fucking systems down, everything that they're seeking infinite growth, tax them out the ass, and then pay for a UBI with that. Like give people a dividend, just like in the oil industry in Alaska. The people, if you live there full time.
The peace dividend you were talking that Hudson was mentioning near the end there.
Yeah, well, yeah. If you
dividend.
Okay. If you don't like the term UBI, use dividend. Okay,
Yeah,
that's literally what it is. Because if you look at the model that Alaska has, because a lot of dumb people are like, oh, I'd like to see somebody live off a UBI or this, that, the other. Okay, it's supplemental. It's not meant to be a living income. Maybe some people, depending on their life circumstances and bill situations, could potentially live off of it. Point is, in the dividend in Alaska, if you live there as a full-time resident, you are given a yearly or bi-yearly, I don't live there, I'm not sure, but you are given a check because you are allowing, as a citizen, the oil company to extract your resource that you own by living there. So if we adopt the same model, which has to come at some point, that's the only option. I mean, we're going to suffer for a long time before some genius in Congress is like, I got an idea. Like, so we're going to go on this forever until somebody realizes, like, okay, if we let these AI companies, we let these automation companies chase their infinite income goals, then we got to tax them, and then we can pay the dividend for that, for people not having jobs anymore, people not being able to afford anything. Because as I've said since day one, the reason I am sitting here is AI is coming for your fucking job. End of story. There's almost nothing that people can do that they eventually won't be able to let automation or some sort of AI run, like it or not. So we're not only in a housing crisis, a food crisis, a health crisis, an economic crisis, an ecological crisis. We're going to be facing a joblessness crisis like no one has ever experienced in this country through any depression or any such thing. So that's coming. It's already here for a lot of people. IT jobs are gone. I'm in writing, education, and art and design. All that shit's gone. How many more skills do I need to have to try to find something? I've been looking for work forever. So that's coming for you too. That's basically it. So we'll see if any of these changes that Trump is starting to put into place might be potentially good, but it's not because it's out of altruism. Even if it benefits people, he's getting something out of it, which I don't really care. I don't really give a shit. If you want to get something out of it and you get something out of it, but also you accidentally, which Jared said before, he blunders into doing the right thing, for the wrong reasons a lot of the time. Fine. I don't care. I really don't care. Go sit on your stupid gold throne. I don't give a shit. Just give people something. Do something.
Abe Lincoln did not end slavery because he just really hated slavery.
No.
He kind of, quote, you could make the argument that he stumbled back asswards into doing it, but it fucking happened, and that's all that matters.
Yeah, I mean, and that is all that matters. And you could champion him as a hero if you want to, or you could say it was the greatest thing that ever happened.
He's just a guy.
Pretty great.
He was the guy who was there when it happened.
Yeah, it was a pretty great thing that was already, coming. The train had left the station on that one. But
it's necessity. No one does anything because they just like look. What that's kind of like that's the point of communism is we're like, look, guys, we're an intelligent species. We can like read the writing on the wall and make some changes to reduce the amount of pain that has to happen in these like freaking transitions. But no one does anything because they just wanna. We could start doing that again. Communism. But Lincoln, like if you look at the entire U.S. Civil War, that was through the necessity of trying desperately to keep the country a country, changes happened. Not just because we're like, this would be morally correct. It's because we are at a point where we will die or do this thing. And then we did the thing.
And the same with the civil rights movement. There was no other way but one way forward. And you could still say in both counts, like slavery still exists. It's still happening, with prison labor and such. And, and racial inequality, sexual inequality, like every kind of inequality still exists and still is, very active today. So it's, not like these things of like, like they're great moments in history, but do we really see the proof of what they were intended to be? I don't know. Time will tell.
It's my like signing off message because it's related to what we were just talking about.
Yes.
But this is another like thing that is being said that who knows. Like last week we talked about it's going to be illegal to boycott Israel bill, and then there was enough people yelling about that it didn't even go up for a vote. They just completely said nope, not touching that. That's really unpopular. Yeah. So we have. This disastrous Republican reconciliation bill would cut Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act by $715 billion, throwing 13.7 million Americans off of Medicaid and health insurance they currently have in order to give a $1.2 trillion dollar tax break to the top 1%. It must be defeated. And you know what, Bernie? I agree. I wish you would have had this energy for, in April of 2023, the unwinding of Medicaid, where 25 million people were disenrolled from Medicaid, and that happened, not this could happen. That's a thing that happened, and Joe Biden did that. And remember, key points to consider. While 25 million people were disenrolled, the majority were due to procedural reasons, such as incomplete paperwork or outdated contact information. So you see, it's almost like they didn't get kicked off their health insurance because it was a paperwork error. Therefore, it somehow is less bad.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah, it's
sorry.
their fault, not the
Yeah,
government's
it's these
fault.
dumbass poor people. If they
Yeah.
could fill out a fucking piece of paper.
Right, exactly. That is literally exactly it.
Sorry, I'm being
So yeah,
sarcastic.
no, you're completely correct. But yeah, we'll keep going if we were allowed to keep going. But we are just about at time. So we will be back with you again next week with whatever the hell's going on then, because who could really have foreseen this week?
Hey, maybe this time next week we're going to be talking about the newly recognized nation of Palestine.
Yes, hopefully we will be, honestly. And if he does it, we will give him the W.
He'll go to Fort Knox
right
and look
here.
at the gold. Send us a
Yeah,
picture, big
right?
empty, the New York Fed with nothing in it.
Yeah, right. And so hopefully this time next week, the speculation that we're always stuck in, we'll have something more concrete for you. We hope you have a good week and you do the best that you can, taking care of yourselves and each other, and being well and being safe. And we wish you all the best, and we will see you next week. So thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you again soon. So bye.